Great Republican tradition here, going back to a priest here called Hughes, who went off on holidays one time, come back and found that the Church of Ireland clergyman Mr. Stoney, who Stoneys are still here, had removed his cow as part of his tithes, which you had to pay your 10% to the maintenance of the Anglican or the established church. And Hughes got really annoyed about this, and he challenged Stoney to a debate about their various religious and political views. And it was held in Castlebar, and there were 10,000 people turned up. The army had to come along and try and keep control in the debate between Stoney and Hughes. So this town has produced fascinating characters down over the years. From the Republican tradition, say, just living up the road there was General Michael Kilroy. That's right. And his son Pather, who's still here, and his son, generations going back, they ran a forge up there at one stage, and he was involved in the West Mayo Brigade of the old IRA. And as you drive around the area, you'll see out our road out in Glen Hest, you'll see where the Skerda ambush took place. So there's lots of history here in the 1920s as well of what happened to the town and the Republican and all those other kind of movements and so on and so forth. So I'll tell you what we do. If you'd like, I know you've all been driving, so will we walk up onto have we the time, Michael?
Yeah. How are you feeling? Yeah. Walk up onto the viaduct. It's lovely spot.
Lovely view from the viaduct, and we'll just talk a little bit about it. Influence on things. Do you know one of the things they standardised? Time. People in this town in the 1830s and 40s had their own time. People in Castlebar had their own time. Maybe it was dominated by the bell ringing at 12 o'clock in the day. Maybe it wasn't. But people had, different places had their own ideas of what time it was at any time in the day. So you couldn't say to someone, anyway, you couldn't be ringing them up or contacting them, but the railway standardised time because you then had to have timetables and trains running and arriving at certain times and leaving at certain times. So it had a big influence. Also it had a big influence on bringing in new ideas in shops and things like that, because goods could be exported down from Dublin and from the big centres down to places like Westport and Castlebar. And in 1890s there was a big debate going on in Ireland. And you'll see it in Mayo, in what was to become Mayo County Council, and also in Parliament in London. It was to be called the All Red Route. And what they were planning on doing, if you look at a map if you look at a map of the world in the 1900s, all the red bits are part of the British Empire. And they wanted. The idea was to be able to get to Canada quickly. Now you could go from Cove, that was a traditional way of travelling, go down to Cove, get the train from Cove. But there were people promoting the idea of Blacksod Bay as being the new place, and they would have a railway line running from Dublin to Castlebar to Westport to Newport, out here towards Achill, and then cutting away up cross country and up to the town of Belmullet, and that this would be a new port for going west, which was quite interesting. So the railway was begun in the 1890s, and it's given us a couple of great bridges and viaducts. And by the way, anybody, if you don't want to be driving all the time, there's an incredible use being made of this railway line now. Just out here beyond the town, from the edge of the town all the way to Mulranny, the railway line has been reopened about 3 weeks ago. The entire line is reopened to cyclists and to walkers, and it's absolutely beautiful. I cycled it. It's 18-kilometre cycle. Or you could walk it, or you could do whatever you like and go along. It's beautiful. See the old bridges here and there and so on. So this railway line opened in 1894. But before it did, somebody reminded the people that there was a man called Brian Rua O'Caravan, who was a mystic and a prophecy man and what have you. And he prophesied that the railway, the iron rails, would carry the coffins of young people from Achill and from the west area on its opening and on its closing. He prophesied this apparently long before it happened. And in fact, the first use that was made of the railway was to bring the bodies of the young people who drowned in the Clew Bay boating disaster back to Achill for burying out at a place called Kildavenant. And a tremendous tragedy. Like a lot of people from the west of Ireland went to work in Scotland. People from Donegal and from Mayo and those areas went north to Scotland to pick potatoes and work in the farms there. And in the 1890s, ships would come in here to pick up young people to take them to Scotland for the season. Westport was the port. So young people came across the bay from Achill on an overloaded boat with a big sail, and the sails and those big heavy things, and they all saw their first sight of this steamboat, and they all ran to the side of their small boat, and I can't remember the exact numbers, but as many as 20 of them may have drowned because the boat capsized. And of course they had all the wrong gear, they were dressed for travel and so on and so forth, and their bodies were brought on this railway line all the way back to Achill. And then in 1937, when the railway line was being closed, that was the period, if you like, of the economic war and all with Britain and all that kind of thing, and we were in a very bad state, and roads were beginning to be the new method of transportation. The railway was to be closed. There was another tragedy in Scotland again, in a place called Kirkintullett in southern Scotland. Some young people from Achill again were sleeping in a bothy, and the guy in charge of the whole operation, in charge of the farm out there, he locked the door. They didn't know they were locked inside in the bothy. They were cooking using paraffin or whatever they were using to cook a meal. Someone knocked it over. Simple little accident, very easy. You just walk out the place and that's it. But unfortunately they couldn't get out because the door was locked and they were trapped inside and they were suffocated and burned to death. And there they were transported. Their bodies were brought back to Dublin and by train down to Westport, and there they fulfilled the prophecy, if you like, of Brian Rua O'Caravan. So that was the tragic elements of the railway. But I'm sure that it must have been fascinating to see a steam train coming across here and into the railway station, which was just there beyond us. You can also see the iron bridge that runs up to the church there. It's still in place, the old iron bridge belonging to the railway. So just to finish on a religious note, Newport is fascinating for religion. Way up in the distance up there you can see Knockavilly Glebe. You see the house up there, beautiful Georgian house. That was the minister's house back in the 18th century, and the Church of Ireland church was in there. The Church of Ireland church then in the 19th century moved down to behind Newport House. We can't quite see it, but there's a family now, a Newport family, Loftus, what's his first name? John Loftus. Oh, yeah. John Loftus. He lives in it now. It's the second person. There's another one down near Kilmeno. I don't know if you passed it. There's another church down there, Church of Ireland Church, has been converted into a living accommodation. So John lives up there now. So that was the Church of Ireland moving from that place to that place. Now, if you take... Yeah.
Where was the... What's the youth centre now below?
Oh yeah, I'm going to talk about that.
All right.